In these vast mountain ranges that look like a barren land, there was a man standing in a robe. It was Worthrod Tanas, a man who once held the highest power in the academy in Magentano but is now a ghoul with a wrinkly body, no different from the dead because of what happened to him after trying to kill Lloyd. Now, Worthrod is nothing more than a ghoul filled with revenge, serving under Helcarus, the king of hell. Worthrod was thinking that to summon the king of hell into the world, a clear wish had to be present, and depending on the form of that wish, certain tools were required. If the wish was the desire for someone's death, then the physical body of someone who held a deep grudge against the target would be required. So, Worthrod started looking for something in a certain place. Based on what the King of Hell had told him, the place he was in was a dungeon. Worthrod was silent and stopped walking when he saw a corpse that had already turned into nothing but bones. Helcarus had told Worthrod that the corpse with the grudge could be found there. That person was also a villain in Lloyd's story. This person met a tragic end at the hands of Lloyd Frontera. He had researched ancient black magic to revive his family. He once begged Lloyd for mercy after being caught, but when Lloyd turned his back, he tried to attack him with black magic. Before he could do so, Javier managed to cut off his head. Worthrod picked up the skull of the corpse and aligned it with his own head. This corpse was named Rupellin. Worthrod began talking to the dead skull, bad-mouthing Lloyd, saying that he was the bastard who put them both in this state. Worthrod asked Rupellin's skull if he knew how Lloyd was living his life now. Worthrod said that Lloyd was respected, trusted, and followed by countless people. He said that such privileges should only be enjoyed by competent people like them, and that Lloyd had taken everything away from them. He raised the skull and glared at it, saying that Lloyd was lucky to have a strong knight by his side. He also added that Lloyd's luck brought him the trust of the queen. He asked the skull if life was unfair to them because now both of them were in such a pathetic state. Worthrod smiled like a demon incarnate and said they should drag Lloyd down with them. A large amount of magic particles began to condense in the area. Worthrod said that Rupellin and he should bear the grudges of the entire world and make Lloyd die a tragic death. Then Worthrod laughed creepily as all the magic was absorbed by the skull. Worthrod looked at the skull, thinking that the time was now ready. He contemplated the second required tool, a large amount of fear to infuse into the vessel. He was silent for a moment, considering how to achieve this. To create a large amount of fear, he thought of war. He smiled like a madman, saying that to cause a war, all he needed to do was drive the queen to insanity. Now that he had completed his mission in the dungeon, he left the area and planned to go to the castle of Magentano. Meanwhile, Lloyd, who was bitter about life for being single and the idol of all singles in the world, began pulling down all the love locks that had been put on the fence. He asked what those things were, saying that a token of eternal love was ridiculous. He added that he would crush those locks completely and grind them into dust. He said that if he couldn't have love, then others couldn't either. Then he laughed like a madman. If I had a face like Lloyd's and no one wanted to marry me, I would do the same, since his face is already a plot in itself. Lloyd began taking down the locks as fast as the flash, chanting about couples splitting up and saying goodbye as he called out the names listed on the locks. But this guy was so happy destroying them, like he was possessed by some crazed single-for-life weeb. Javier asked his master if he was aware that he looked like a villain right now. Lloyd replied that he wasn't aware because, at that moment, he was the incarnation of equality. He said that everyone should be equally single for the rest of their lives. Yes, all the locks were removed, and the area was clean of those trashy symbols of romance. Lloyd wiped the sweat from his brow and said that the job was done, though he regretted not bringing more locks back. Javier asked him what the purpose of doing that was. Suddenly, a bright light appeared, catching Lloyd's attention. The light grew brighter, and Lloyd was amazed, thinking this was the flashy thing he had wanted to see but that the winder butt hadn't shown. Meanwhile, Javier remained calm. The fence slowly transformed into a cube that bounced on the floor. It was just a small cube. Lloyd grabbed it, saying it must be the Kier Aura. After obtaining it, the system congratulated him for collecting all the materials for the Aotearoa, but Lloyd's face showed no happiness, just a blank expression devoid of emotion. Lloyd bit his lip as he began shaking, and Javier silently watched him from the side. Then Lloyd suddenly shouted that it was time to move to the next stage immediately, startling Javier. Lloyd stood up, grabbed his coat, and said they needed to head to the Merman Kingdom to finish the task right away. Javier silently thought that his master was a hard worker, as it would have been fine for Lloyd to celebrate his success for a while. But Javier smiled, thinking that this was just who his master was, the man formerly known as Kim Suho. Javier believed that this was why Lloyd could save everyone. In the Merman Kingdom, the Kraken was already guarding the whole kingdom. As they swam down, Lloyd called out to Javier, mentioning how much had happened so far. He said they had built a railroad in hell, given stone ice storage to the orcs, Kanats to the desert, a bathhouse for the Merman Kingdom, and a racetrack for the grass plains. His face smirked as he asked why he was always building good things for other people. Javier asked if Lloyd was acting this way because of the Aotearoa. Javier was sure Lloyd wanted to build this somewhere else, but he had already promised the Merman Kingdom, so there wasn't much he could do about it. Javier asked if there was another way. Lloyd said Javier was wrong because there was something he could do. Lloyd smiled like a demon with his meme-worthy face and said there was a way to steal the Aotearoa and build it in their own territory. Javier looked at him with disgust. Lloyd asked why Javier was glaring at him like that. Lloyd told Javier that he's always giving Lloyd the face that says, "You are the most evil bastard in the world." Lloyd asks him if he's done anything mean to anyone so far, but as a reader, we all know what Lloyd has done so far. Javier didn't say anything and just looked at him the same. Lloyd had no choice but to give up and tell Javier the truth. He said that yes, he did it at least twice, but no, maybe 3 times, and he was still talking, saying it reached 4 times, but we all know that the legendary things he had done can't be counted. And now, they were able to reach the castle of the Merman King, Ariel. King Ariel greeted Lloyd and said that right now, his ugly but brave friend was in her audience, and she was happy that Lloyd really obtained all the materials for the Truth Jewel. King Ariel smiled and told Lloyd that the Merman Kingdom would provide anything that Lloyd needed for the construction of the Truth Jewel. She also added that Lloyd may freely use any of the kingdom's facilities and proceed with the construction. Lloyd bowed down and thanked the king of the Merman Kingdom. By the way, although Ariel was female, she was still referred to as the king in the Manhwa. To continue, Lloyd said that he would put his all into its construction and bring back the glory the Merman Kingdom had enjoyed in the mythical age. Then Lloyd's tears started falling on the floor of the castle. This caught the attention of King Ariel, so she called Lloyd and asked him why he was crying with such a sad face. Lloyd started wiping the tears from his eyes. He apologized for the disgraceful sight and told the king that what he felt was nothing. King Ariel told him that it was not nothing. She told Lloyd that he is their hero and their friend, and they would help Lloyd with whatever it is. She asked Lloyd to tell her his problem. Lloyd was silent for a moment. Maybe this bastard was cooking something. Lloyd said that it was just that he was so heartbroken that the Truth Jewel could only be built in the Merman Kingdom. King Ariel asked him what he was talking about because they had agreed to build the Truth Jewel on their land from the start. Lloyd said that was not what he meant. Javier's face started to show doubt because he knew how evil his master was when it came to schemes like this. Lloyd's tears started to flow more. This bastard deserved an Oscar award. He said that once the Truth Jewel was complete, those blinded by greed would incite wars in order to possess it. He said that when he thought of how this peaceful and beautiful Merman Kingdom would have to suffer again, it broke his heart. This caught the attention of King Ariel, and what Lloyd said actually made sense. Lloyd said that still, it was a promise, so he would begin the work right away. King Ariel called Lloyd and told him to just wait a minute. King Ariel asked him if the Truth Jewel could only be built there in her kingdom. Lloyd replied no, saying that it could be built anywhere with at least 70 meters water depth. King Ariel suggested that what Lloyd said was quite true, and she thought it would be better to build it on some other land. Hearing that, Lloyd's crying face started to change. This bastard must be holding his laughter inside. On the other hand, Javier couldn't believe the promise agreement of Lloyd. Then these 2 guys left the area like they were the boss, and it was a perfectly planned scheme by the greatest manipulator, Lloyd Frontera. Lloyd, with his poker face, said that they would build the Aotearoa on their estate, and the Merman Kingdom could use it any time. Lloyd said that it really went well, saying he was so worried about the dangers that the Merman Kingdom might face. Javier just looked at him, but Lloyd was still saying something. He said that he really didn't tell a single lie at all and that he really only told her the truth. But Lloyd's face changed, like some sort of villain, and he said that although he said he was worried and everything was true, he didn't mean it from his heart. This bastard only works for the profits, not for the feelings. Javier just took a deep sigh. Lloyd asked him what that meant. He asked Javier if he thought he was a coward. Javier said that he did not. Javier just smiled and said that isn't everyone satisfied now. Javier said that is all that matters now. Lloyd raised his hand to Javier for a high five. He said that he was amazed that Javier had finally become a little pragmatic. Lloyd's calluses could be seen on his hands, which meant that he was a hard-working person and not someone who just sits around. Lloyd asked Javier if he admitted that they were both the same now. Javier just looked at him without saying anything. Then Javier smacked Lloyd's hand as they both gave a high five to one another. Javier opened up the topic about the Hell Gate that opened after the bone dragon Yang Yang was summoned. Lloyd didn't let Javier finish his question and told him that he would ask the Truth Jewel how to close it. Then Lloyd and Javier gave another high five to one another. This is what happens when a good child is given a bad influence by a bad child. But in a way, too much goodness to the point of being a saint is not always guaranteed a happy ending, and you should have some other side in your body in order to succeed, and that's what happened to Javier, who was influenced by the idol of the demons in hell, named Lloyd Frontera.